Ready when you are, Mr. Chair.
All right. Good afternoon. It is 3:01, and I'd like to call the annual budget meetings together. We're going to be meeting today, Wednesday, and Thursday from 3 to 5, and we welcome each and every one of you that's here with us, and anyone also that might be with us online. And I am going to ask, for the sake of the record, Sarah, if we could have a roll call to see who's with us this afternoon.
Baylor.
Aye.
Connor. Aye. Freeman.
Aye.
Fusco.
Aye.
Holland.
Aye.
Kamer. Lombardo.
Aye.
Malik.
Aye.
McKittrick.
Aye.
Neal.
Here.
Omobian.
Aye.
Somerville.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just a reminder to everyone as we begin, we will try to keep all of our questions confined to numbers as opposed to program. If there, Mr. Fricker, if we have any questions, I would ask any questions that would come to you or Ms. Donnell.
Correct.
Anyone else?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
And then I would ask also, when you would respond to those individuals, if I could be carbon copied on the responses.
Yeah, we will respond to the entire council
Excellent.
on all
Okay,
these
very, very
questions.
good. That would be great. So the meeting obviously does require, I know on my part at least, it requires some discipline because I hear something that tickles my ears and I want to I want to run off into right field, but we'll really try to stay by the numbers. Thanks to each and every council member that is here. We trust that our folks in D.C. are having good meetings this week.
Mr. Chair, I want to point out for the record, Councilwoman Mosley is also here.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Councilwoman Mosley. I'm sorry we missed you. Thank you for being with us. All right. Mr. Fricker, if you could start us out.
Okay, well, I want to welcome everyone to day one of our 2022 operating budget hearings. Today we are going to hear from the Mayor's Office, the Office of Integrated Development, which also includes the Planning Department, and then our Department of Public Safety, which also includes the Police and Fire Departments. So with that, I think what I would like to do is just have each department, kind of go through, present whatever they want to present, and then if there's questions about some of the specific numbers in the budgets, we can address those. So with that, I'd like to defer to the Chief of Staff from the Mayor's Office to present the Mayor's Office budget.
Thank you, Mr. Fricker. Thank you, Chair. Gert Willems, Mayor's Chief of Staff. I am here to present on behalf of the Mayor's Office for the Mayor's Administration portion. I did have to have some clarity myself, so just for the purposes of this, you can see we have 10.5 budgeted employees. Just so we're all on the same page, that includes Mayor Horrigan, Tamika Rose, Deputy Chief of Staff, Marco Somerville, Deputy Mayor of Intergovernmental Affairs, myself, the Chief of Staff, Jake Bell, the Multimedia Coordinator, Stephanie Marsh, the Communications and Media Supervisor, Lori Huffman, the Executive Assistant to the Mayor, Teresa Lloyd, Administrative Assistant, and two positions that are currently unfilled, Communications Director and Policy and Strategy Director. We do have a 0.5 in there, and that is Summer Hall. Summer we split with OID. So just so we're all on the same page, who that 10.5 actually includes. There was some shuffling of employees. Ellen Lander-Nish for the longest time was still with the Law Department. We've put that back under the Mayor's umbrella this year. So you would see definitely some realignment within that budget. We did provide our goals and objectives with regards to, again, the essential services that we provide. We want to make sure that we're providing the highest quality of service at that level. 100% the equitable distribution of all the ARPA dollars. That is going to be a hardcore conversation we're going to have for the next couple of years. So I think everybody recognizes we have a belts and suspender approach with all of this, so it is a slow process. We're unwinding what the federal requirements are. Not a lot has been spent, but we do definitely have some goals in mind with that, and we've been bringing council along with that conversation. So any questions you have along that lines, we would definitely address at a later time. The Racial Equity and Social Justice Task Force, unfortunately, a pretty new document. I don't know that we've all had a chance to digest that, but it's something we will definitely be working on during the goals and our objectives during this next year. And as always, increase economic opportunities. I think coming out of COVID, it is one of the greatest opportunities and probably one of the highest goals we have set across the board this year in every department. We did provide, the mayor's office did a 2022 strategy map. Thank you, Annie McFadden, before she left. I absolutely do not have the skill set, so I'm going to thank Annie on her way out for that last gift. Also with me today is Frank Williams with Labor Relations and Phil Young, our police auditor. So I will allow them a few moments to speak, and then we will definitely take some questions.
Hello, again, Frank Williams with Labor Relations. My first time sitting in on one of these budget hearings, so I look forward to watching the process. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Phil Young, the police auditor, and I'm sure we'll have questions as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if we can, and I would just ask all the presenters, because it's a pretty good sized document here, if whenever we're speaking, if you can just refer us to a page number. So I hate to say so that we're all on the same page, but that is the purpose. So Mr. Fricker, where would you direct us to?
So these will be right at the beginning. This will start on page 3 with the mayor's administration. Yeah.
Kind of a different look this year.
Yes, yeah, this is part of some of the new functionality that Workday offers. Okay. It has a very kind of fancy integration with Excel, so we're able to kind of create these spreadsheets and then automatically update them from the data that's in Workday. So, taking advantage of some of that new functionality.
Okay, excellent.
Mr. Chair, I can see that there's a hand raised. Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Okay. Mr. Malik?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone who's here to present to us. It's always really informative. I thank the City Administration for providing the strategy map and the document about the goals and objectives. It's really appreciated. My question, Ms. Wilm, is about the going to page 3 and the you talked about the number of budgeted employees. I know we discussed briefly the Racial Equity and Social Justice Task Force in their Q3 report and in their final report. Both the Communications Subcommittee and the Equitable Workforce Development Subcommittee recommended both a full-time cabinet-level officer focused on racial equity who can move this forward and staff to support that person. And they both recommended that as a goal to be implemented in 2022 as one of their top things to be implemented. Is that something, it doesn't appear that that's reflected in the salaries and wages there in the line or the number of budgeted employees. Is that something that we can include to make sure that we are able to have someone driving forward this report that we're all digesting?
Unfortunately, with the timing of that report and just being recently released, we are not in the position to have any kind of movement on that at this time. We will definitely take a look at that, make some determinations on what we can implement, what we cannot implement, what can happen this year, what we need to put off. But it's just too premature based on how quick we got that report to make any kind of promise or dedication at this point. It is 100% a conversation that is going to take place, that needs to take place. It's just the timing. I just cannot make any kind of representation at that point.
And I appreciate that, Ms. Whelm. I guess, and I shared this, and I believe that the recommendation was made in the Q3 report in November. It has been several months since then, and this was a top priority of 2 of the committees. And I don't think that we need to have the number of people or the exact details of job descriptions ironed out, but I believe we should make a commitment in this document to carve out the money and the number of budgeted folks in this. I mean, this work is critical work. Our community leaders have spent over a year putting together these recommendations, and I really think we should have a sense of urgency around this and make sure that we don't drop the baton in terms of implementing this, and that role and support staff is going to be absolutely critical to implementing the dozens of recommendations. So I just want to make that comment for the record.
No problem. I don't want there to be any confusion that there's no sense of urgency or we do not understand what the task force has asked us to do. We do have some opportunities with some staffing that's already in place. I think a lot of the work Tamika does, I think a lot of the work Marco does, a lot of the work Sheena's doing. It's just putting those under one umbrella. The mayor has made space with hiring a policy and strategic director. There's a lot of opportunities on how we use that role, but it's looking at what the task force has actually asked us to do, marrying that up with what we are already doing, and maybe renaming things, realigning things. But it's us getting our story out. This is what we're already doing. These are the positions that already help with this particular issue, and making sure we're getting that known in the community and how Akron's already working on this issue and where we need to grow on the issue.
Absolutely, and just to follow up briefly, Mr. Chair, you know, I appreciate that there is a lot of work that's ongoing, but I think one of the things that both of the committees stressed in their report is the importance, when you look across the nation, of having someone whose only job is focused on advancing equity. And I know that Ms. Rose works on a number of policy initiatives, works on infant vitality and other things. Mr. Somerville works on intergovernmental relations. And again, one of the things that really came strongly out of those committees was a focus. Someone should be focusing on only this so that we can move these forward. But I appreciate the back and forth.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments as well, Ms. Wilms.
Thank you.
Mr. Malik, was there anything else, please? Okay.
Nothing further right now.
Okay,
I do have an additional question about the police auditor, but I'll defer to Ms. Holland.
Okay, very good. All right, can we move ahead now? We would look at...
I had my hand raised, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
if I may.
I apologize. I'm looking at the budget on my iPad as well as. Okay, thank you, Ms. Holland. Please forgive me.
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. Chair. And thank you, everyone, for the comprehensive information in the presentations today. Ms. Wilms, you may have just now answered my question, but I want to pose it anyway just to make sure that I understand. Is it the present plan to go forward and fill the communications director position and the policy and strategy director position?
Yes, in my mind, as soon as possible.
Okay. And was I correct in understanding that one of the positions that represents this net increase of 3 positions is the movement of the position formerly held by Ms. Lander-Nisht from the legal counsel's budget over to the mayor's office? Did I get that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This piggybacks on my colleagues' questions. I remember when we used to get the budget reports, and if it's somewhere else in some of the documents that we received, I apologize. But we used to get breakouts of the salaries, and it would show those that were filled as well as those that were budgeted but weren't filled, so that we could have an idea of what that looks like, and especially when it came to the end of the year, so we could tell if that wasn't filled, you know, what was left. Is that anywhere in any of the support documentation, or if it's not, can we have that, please?
So we do have a document that does that information. We will provide that to council.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fricker, I have a hard time hearing you. There's a little echo in the chamber. Did you say, sir, that it's somewhere and I'm missing it, or you'll get it?
No, we have not distributed that to council, but we do have a document that has that information which we can provide.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Excellent. Not seeing any other hands.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Oh, Mr. Malley.
Thank you. Ms. Williams, a similar question regarding the police auditor's office. I think this is on page 5 of the budget, and it has 2 budgeted employees, and I believe that's full-time auditor and a full-time administrative assistant. And I know that that's something that the administration, a change to the administration made, and I know council was in support of that, and we're happy about that. I know that one of the things that we have continued to discuss, it was part of the Reimagined Public Safety report from January 2021, and then also last March in the first report from the Criminal Justice Subcommittee of the task force, and then every quarter since then was a recommendation to have a deputy police auditor. Again, it was a recommendation that they suggested to be implemented 2022, both to ensure that there's adequate capacity in the office, but also for succession planning. You know, obviously we all wish the absolute best for Mr. Young there, but you know, if someone were to leave unexpectedly, that's a role that would then be vacant, an important role. So can this role, the deputy police auditor role, be included in this budget, or not at this time?
Not at this time. At this point, the position of Phil Young is being filled. The auditor has told me he's had an opportunity to make an offer on the administrative assistant. We do have conversations that are scheduled to go forward now that we have the final report from the task force to talk about capacity issues, workflow, and what might or might not be needed in the future. But that is a future internal meeting yet to take place.
Okay, thank you very much. Just not to, you know, continue to beat the drum, but just my own comment. You know, this is a repeated recommendation, one of the most frequent recommendations made by the Criminal Justice Subcommittee. I think it's, you know, an important way of bolstering our commitment to building trust between police and community is making sure we have adequate capacity in our police oversight mechanisms. So I think that this is absolutely something we should move forward with in 2022.
Ms. Williams, you did say there has been an offer made to an assistant, and I think Mr. Young, you've obviously met the individual as well. And
Yes, Mr.
Chair.
We'll get with you in just one moment. Just one moment.
I have several screens up trying to get everything.
Okay, Ms. Amodian, we'll come back to you in just a moment, okay?
I can't find my raised hand. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Okay. I will, I'll watch out then. Go ahead, Mr. Young.
No, I can't find my raised hand. That's why I'm speaking out loud, because I'm having trouble with all the gadgets I have here.
Okay. After Mr. Young is completed, I'll come to you then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, we've made an offer to an administrative assistant. She's accepted the offer, and right now we're waiting on a background to be completed. There were, I think, 11 911 operators that were just hired, and they had to get those backgrounds out of the way first. And he told me about the middle of the month is when he could start that. I tried to do some checking today to see if I could get any more information, and I couldn't.
Okay. So we're probably about how far out on the process?
I would say probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but an offer's been made.
At least 2 to 3 weeks. The area is being set up now, phones. We've ordered computers. When she comes in, I would say that I'm looking toward the end of the month.
Okay. That's good news.
It is great news.
You're not going to know how to act now, so I'm glad somebody's coming your way. That's great.
No comment.
No comment. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, and just for everybody's sake, I now have 2 different devices, so I can see our folks that want to speak, and I can also see our budget items in front of us as well. Okay, thank you. All right, and Ms. Amobian, I will come to you now.
Yes, was that Mr. Young speaking? I couldn't hear what he said.
Can you hear me now, Mrs. Amobian?
A little better. If you could, are you speaking in the mic or is it my equipment? I don't know.
I'm speaking.
Did you say you've identified a person to hire? Is that what you said?
Yes, we've identified, interviewed. There were, I think, 4 candidates. We selected a candidate, and we're just waiting for a background to be concluded, and then we can go on to the next process.
Oh, so you've, okay. I just wanted to make sure that we clarified that. So this person will be hired within a reasonable amount of time. Is that what I'm hearing or not?
That's correct, as long as she passes that background.
Okay, thank you.
And just for all
Thank
of
you,
our
Mr. Chair.
all of our sakes here, we might want to speak, really get into the microphone like you're talking to somebody that's 400 miles away. All right. So
That or my ears are old and bad. I don't know which.
no comment. So
Go ahead.
all right. Would you like to continue? Anything else to add or?
No, is there any other questions?
Okay, any other questions we have here for our administration? Okay, I'm looking. Okay, thank you so much, and Mr. Williams, thank you. Welcome, first time here to budget hearings, and thank you, Mr. Young. Appreciate the meeting we had here a few weeks ago. That was great to have you and the chief out. You know, the folks of the 9th Ward appreciate it deeply. Ms. Wilms, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Next up is Mrs. Samples' ward. We're going to do the same thing.
Ah, excellent. Fantastic.
Okay, so next we have the Office of Integrated Development.
Good afternoon, members of council, both here and virtual. Sean Volman, Deputy Mayor for Integrated Development. I have a number of members of my team here with me to make sure that I say everything correctly and don't go down too many rabbit holes. But thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to just present a little bit about our department and where we are and where we're looking at going in the future. We're comprised of 7 divisions, you know, as I think you all know, OID was set to try to break down some of the silos and increase the communication between the different departments in order to, you know, better facilitate projects and you know, our other goals for the city of Akron. Development engineering is the smallest of our OID divisions. It currently consists of Michelle DeFiore and Mark Greer. They do an incredible job serving as a liaison between the economic and community development and the engineering bureau. They also oversee the Great Streets programs, as well as our special capital requests for OID, including the Pool and Community Center Reinvestment Program, Lock 3, and Summit Lake. In addition to the regular duties that they've been doing over the years, we are expanding, for 22, we're expanding the Great Streets program into South Arlington. We're going to continue to implement the Main Street Wayfinding program. I think you've all seen the signs coming up downtown. And then I think of special significance to everyone on council is they will be implementing the speed tables into all of your wards coming up soon. Another division is long-range planning. Helen Tomick, who's here, and her long-range planning team manage our entire CDBG, home, and ESG programs, along with traditional planning activities and the capital budget. Added to that mix this year is plan to spend about $25 million over the next few years in ARPA on housing projects. This team, you know, has a lot ahead of it in successful implementation of these projects, but I think they're up to it. Housing, homelessness, public spaces, and neighborhood development continue to be their priorities. Zoning, under the direction of Mike Antonucci, the zoning division's essential function is to administer the zoning code and subdivision of land within the city of Akron. Zoning provides technical support for the Planning Commission the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the Urban Design and Historic Preservation Commission. Business Retention and Expansion, or as Sam Vizan likes to say, BRE. They continue to do a phenomenal job in the blocking and tackling of economic development. Over the course of the year, Sam, Brad, and Dave Messner have conducted thousands of business calls and visits, all while tending our relationships with Team NEO, Jobs Ohio, the county, and others. The development division has had probably the most change of OID over the last year or so. But development is where the economic and the community development projects are all negotiated, financed, and launched. This division supports the JEDs, all city-owned land and acquisitions. With the retirements of Adele Roth and Abraham Westcott, it is a bit of change. We are currently in the process of replacing the development manager position. We have gotten applications in, and just getting the list of names to start conducting interviews. We are also hiring a real estate negotiator, as well as a land marketing officer to help with just bulk up that staff that has had some hits lately. The entrepreneurship and small business. The division supports entrepreneurship and small business in the city. Under the direction of Katie Breck, the division has pursued several new initiatives to support entrepreneurship, including a pilot program known as Thrive to support Black entrepreneurs in Akron. Also, the Small Business Boost program through the city's Financial Empowerment Fund. Heather Roschek continues to serve as the liaison to Bounce and manage the Rubber City Match program, with Julie Przuski maintaining relationships with all of our small businesses in Akron. Downtown operations. I think despite the rockiness of COVID and working everything out, they've done a wonderful job. We've had festivals canceled in the past. We're coming back with hopefully all of them this upcoming year. Despite everything, the Winter Blast events attracted record numbers with over 16,000, and we are looking forward to amplifying our marketing efforts for the summer through a collaborative marketing plan with the Civic, the Night Stage, Goodyear Theater, and E.J. Thomas Hall, basically Howard Park, to solidify our position as an arts and entertainment destination. Parks and Recreation, as you know, led by Brittany Schmokel, continues to offer exceptional programming to our residents of all ages. As an essential city service, Recreation delivers free and affordable programming, creating safe neighborhoods for our children and families alike. Continued investments into the Parks and Rec build equity and opportunity while enhancing the quality of life for all. And then finally, another part of OID that has had some major changes this year would be the administration of OID, including Mr. Hardy leaving and myself being picked to run the department. And also equally important, if not more so, adding Katie Breck as a member of the city's cabinet and mayor's cabinet and helping me run that division. I think a lot of our, at least, time coming up will be spent on making sure that the ARPA programs that kind of fall under OID are launched and successfully done. I think as Ms. Williams mentioned, we're getting through this. We're going to do some, I think, great things. The buckets that OID oversee would be the housing, the economic recovery, and the public spaces. And we want to have that money spent in the most thoughtful, equitable, and impactful ways possible. We're also looking at revisiting and updating the downtown plan, which was drafted before the onset of the pandemic and the resulting issues of work from home that were not contemplated when that plan was created. So that is what I have. Do I turn over to you now, Steve?
That's it. If there's any.
Okay, and if you said this, please forgive me. On page 9, 2.7 budget employees this year, 1, but under CDBG. Why the change there?
So this is one of the changes that's come about just because of Workday and kind of the way we've shuffled things around. So, within the OID department, the staffing level is essentially the same as it was last year. It's just You'll see another area where there's 0 budget last year, and I think there's 4.5 this year. So it's just, and it's all within the CD budget. So it's just some shifting around of how things are coded, you know, due to the change to Workday.
So next couple of days, are we going to see those things recurring because of the change?
So I think one of our goals this year in integrated development has really the most complex way that the employees are charged, and a lot of that is due to the CD funding, and certain people's roles are partially funded by the grant. So I think one of the goals for 2022 is to kind of, you know, take a look at the roles that we have, both within OID and some of the other divisions that use CD, and try to, you know, maybe simplify the way those employees are charged to make it a little bit more simplistic than what it is now, which is, you know, very complicated.
Okay.
And so as far as overall, I think what has stood out is we did add a full-time person at Lock 3. And then we are looking at just, it's new positions really, but you know, the development manager retired, we're replacing the development manager. We had a city planner retire that assisted with development. We're going to hire a land marketing officer to fill that position, you know, that number, but focus more on the best ways to sell city land and the best ways to transfer it to private parties. And then we are adding a position in that was a real estate negotiator. I think that position had been budgeted for a different, was it an economist last year? And
that is correct. I think we're in lieu of filling an economist, we're going to use fill a real estate negotiator.
Okay.
But overall, the numbers have stayed very similar to last year.
Okay, great. Let me start, and I see hands up on the screen. Let me start live here in the chambers if there's any questions that we would have, and then I can pay attention. So, Mr. Fusco?
I'm going to be really loud, okay? I'm joking. The page 13, the debt service, I see a decrease in terms of the 21 expenses. Just curious about that and why 21 was higher and 22 is going to be budgeted lower.
So that's largely due to some debt service that we charge. You'll see that big line item there, and it's just the way that some of the debt service hit last year. We won't have as much budgeted in this particular area this year, so that's the primary reason for that change.
Of course, that's all the JED projects and such?
It is, so the debt service charge of the JED is a mixture of JED debt service and then also some of our GO debt service, yes.
Okay. And then also noticed the Parks and Recreation, and I certainly appreciate an increase in that piece.
Well, so I do apologize. That is a typo. So where it's going from 21.5 to 22.5, it's actually still at 21.5. So,
now I don't appreciate it.
Yeah, that was a typo. So recreation staff is remaining the same at 21.5.
Okay, very good. I do have some programming questions, but I'm going to save those, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me come now to Tara, please. Thank you.
Did you call on me, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I have a question, Sean. I have a few questions. First question is about the 2022 goals and objectives, where I see several development agreements pending. How many of those have been signed, or are they just still in the developmental stage?
I don't think, if we listed in goals and objectives, I do not believe it was, I would have had one that was a development.
I'm having a hard time hearing you, Sean.
If it was listed in the goals and objectives, it was not one that has a development agreement signed yet. There are ones with letters of understanding. I think of the ones that I listed in the goals and objectives, the only one that has been to council, I believe, is the Good Park Alpha Homes project. The rest of them will all need to come to council at some point in time. But we had done RFPs. The division had done a number of RFPs last summer before I took my role with the division, and we've gone through those, and we're working on getting projects done.
Okay, and then my final question is, on your 2021 accomplishments, there's one that says successful closing of Goodrich Housing Project. What is that?
That is the project that's going on at the old Goodrich buildings 10 and 17, up near Birches and by Bounce. And we had a closing on that. He's been putting in units. The developer's name is Lance Osborne. They've been putting in units, and I think they're pre-leasing and they're getting ready to open.
Can you send me some more information on that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Holland, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Volman. I am looking at page 25. This is concerning OID long-range planning ARPA grant.
Yes.
And I'm a little confused, I suspect, but I'm looking for a little guidance here. We have a number here representing 8 budgeted employees and a salary and wages figure in excess of $5 million. Can you walk me through what this particular page represents, please?
So I can walk you through that. So if you look at the materials that were presented yesterday, the last page in that document has a more detailed look at the ARPA funding. So all the ARPA funding is contained right here in this budget. So the $5,278,000 that is showing up there in the wage represents the 8 people that we are charging there, plus we talked about the $5 million of premium pay that we are offering through the ARPA program. So that's what that represents.
Okay, so we do have a benefits amount that attaches to that. Does that represent pension contribution on premium pay?
No, that's only on the 8 employees.
And who are in a general sense, functionally, who are the 8 employees?
So the 8 employees are so one of them is the violence prevention coordinator that we hired, Danico Buckley Knight. 3 are going to be people that are utilized in the housing rehab program, and then there are 4 people that will be assigned to do the lead service replacements.
Okay, so they will not be contractors. They'll actually be on the payroll.
They will be city employees,
for the
correct.
city of Akron. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Anybody else? Did we cover all 8?
Nope, that's it.
That's it.
So, yeah.
Okay, and dropping down on that same page, Interfund Expenses, can you identify what that is?
So that's a mix of the Akron CARES funding, which is $2.5 million, I believe, as well as the amount that we were budgeting for revenue replacement that I talked about yesterday.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ballack?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Volman, I had a question. I believe, and Mr. Freeman, this is related to the budget and the staffing. And my question is the tree canopy implementation under OID?
Not anymore. I believe that's John Malish, who is now in public service, is implementing the tree canopy.
Well, it sounds like that's a question that I'm going to ask on day 2 or 3. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Mr. Fusco, come back to you.
Thank you. Again, though, back to page 16, reference the recreation budget. It is, I recognize that there's a typo on that page, but in terms of the salaries and such, it reflected overall about a $700,000 increase, was that reflective
So
of?
the majority of that is due to the fact that we raised the minimum wage for our recreation specialists up to $15 an hour.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Again,
Mr. Mobley.
I don't know what my hand feature is on my computer. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Volman, this may be you or Mr. DeShazier, I'm not sure, but let me know if this needs to be asked somewhere else. With regard to Elevate Akron, the leadership and assistance to that, where does that continue in this budget, and where, and can you talk specifically, because I understand there is going to be a change. Is someone else going to replace Mr. DeJeanette?
I don't know how to answer that last question. I think that's it's pretty early, and I think that the chamber would be, somewhat mostly involved in that. I don't have a good answer for that for you. I will look into it and get something to you.
Well, that position is really designed to help Akron with
understood.
the problem that we've identified. So do we plan to have someone in that position to carry out that responsibility?
I believe so, yes. But that, I don't think that was part of the budget.
Is that part of the budget?
I don't think that's part. I again, new to this, I could be wrong, but I did not think that was expense of our operating budget.
Yeah, was there a particular page, Mr. Mobian, that you were referring to in what we're looking at?
Well, I'm looking at the Office of Integrated Development, the business retention expansion part. Is that part of that's part of your area, isn't it, Mr. Volman?
Yes. I mean, we make a contribution
today.
We make a contribution to the chamber on an annual basis. I believe it's $160,000, and I could look at the contract and see if a portion of that goes towards funding that position.
I just want to make sure that if it's not that position, that there's a position somewhere in this budget that is going to continue to address that problem, because I know we don't think that we have addressed it fully yet.
Okay.
That was a question.
I mean, again, I will look into it and get back to you. I don't believe there was a line item in the budget to fund that position in the past, but I was not, in this role in the past.
Sure, I understand.
Right.
So anyway, if you can get back to council just as to how we are addressing that position.
I will.
Because that is a critical part of Elevate Akron that we've made a commitment to.
Agreed? Yes.
With regard to all the housing, is that under you or is that a separate area? Because I'm trying to follow this budget.
So, with the Arpa funding?
Yes.
Yeah, so the new construction piece of the housing portion will be run through OID. With the housing rehab is under neighborhood assistance. We will be helping set that program up and implementing it, but that would be run under neighborhood assistance.
Could someone explain these new housing things what is Beaver House? And there was another one that was mentioned yesterday.
We had put a number of RFPs out last year, one of which was the property on Beaver Street. That was the old Mason Elementary.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's happening there?
We are working with the Well to put in a housing project. And that, again, that will come back to City Council when the time is correct.
And this is new housing, not rehab?
Correct.
Okay. Now, what about the 330 program? Does that come through you, or that comes through neighborhood development?
I mean, I am familiar with House 330. I don't know that, I mean, it's a private entity, so, you know, but it's you know, it's services to the community, to the I Promise community. I'm not sure I understand your specific question. You're wondering what House 330 is?
Is that in your area, or is that another department? I'm trying to follow where that would be.
I think we would be involved with it to the extent that there is an ARPA request or ARPA funding going towards that project.
And why are we doing this?
Why are we doing?
Why are we doing House 330?
We think it's I mean, they're going to be providing wraparound services to, you know, people in the neighborhood and the I Promise families that are needed, and we think that's a wise investment.
There are wraparound services, but you do know that there are a number of merchants that are going to be in that program that hopefully will be paying rent to the foundation. Is that all factored into this?
That, I mean, we would not be funding the merchants. I mean, our funding would be
No, you're
to,
funding this is the building you're funding?
We're a portion of the build out, and I don't have the entire thing in front of me. I can certainly get you more detail. I think we went over when we did the presentations on ARPA. I believe we discussed that then.
And Mr. Volman, I think maybe there might be some additional programming questions that you might want to confer away from the budget meeting with Mr.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay, that'd be
Yes,
wonderful.
I'm happy to.
Okay, great. Let me go to Tara, please. Ms. Mosley?
Yes, thank you. I may have missed it in the other form. I just had to find it in my documents. When I look on page 24 of goals and objectives, I see one on here, number 4, to improve Joy Park community grounds, and there's a Kaboom playground build and a walking path at the park. Have those numbers changed? Because I know when this came before us before, the amount that they had in there was definitely, they said it was just there as a marker, because it just didn't seem like it was conducive to a walking path, and then had some questions about them turning all that land into just a walking path. So I don't know if there's some other plan other than a walking path that I don't know. I'm a little confused because they never came back to me as to what they really were going to do. So now that it's here, just trying to figure out what the real plan is there, because the amount they had definitely didn't seem like it was an amount that would be for a walking path. And plus,
when you say they, who are you?
Say it again, Sean.
I'm sorry? When you said they did not come back to you, is that my team?
This came before us when the budgets first started. They talked about the markings. When we met with Helen and them, they had markers in there, funding markers, as to how much something would cost. Mm-hmm. And the amount didn't seem conducive to a walking path. But then I asked about were they going to do lighting, and they were supposed to send something to me about that. I never got anything, so I see it on here as number 4, so I'm just trying to figure out where we are with that. Was there more funding added? Because I was a little concerned about a walking path that didn't have lighting attached to it, especially with that much, that much land to just use for a walking path.
Okay, I will make sure that Helen does get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Volman.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. All right, Mr. Fricker.
Okay, so next would be the Department of Public Safety. Let me make sure I don't see anyone here.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. I can see that Councilman Neal has his hand raised.
Okay, Mr. Neal.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And again, I'm going to have to ask for forgiveness if this is in here. Since we have our regular budget dollars and then we also have ARPA dollars, trying to look at how these are being expensed across our community to see if there's, I know some of our communities need more of these dollars than others. And if it's, I believe this part is in Mr. Bowman's piece in regards to, under the housing, the rehab. Just wanted to ask if we could get an idea of how much is being invested in the different wards, first based on which wards actually qualify for those dollars, and then to see how much is being invested. And that is, since Parker record some of this other stuff, and there was some stuff in there about youth violence, I'd like to get an asset map on how much of the ARPA dollars are being invested, not in organizations, but in the wards to address the violence piece as well. I don't know if it's anywhere in these documents because we know that there are certain areas that have been identified as quote-unquote hotspots. And from the documents that I have, it's just hard to tell what that investment is. So to surmise my questions again, from the housing side on rehab and on the youth violence and violence period investment using the ARPA dollars, I'd like to know what that ARPA dollar investment is. And then since we're talking about these programs are going to have to be sustained, how much of our regular budget are we starting to shift that way? Because we know that these dollars are only going to be with us till 2026. So, you know, are we putting things in place to make whatever investment we're making with ARPA sustainable after the fact, because we're starting to shift some of our budget dollars that direction to support whatever initiatives we're doing. Hopefully you can follow my question.
So to the extent that we can, and I don't know to what extent we could do this at this point with the housing rehab and the violence prevention, to the extent that we can, determine the specific locations where those will occur, and again, I don't know that we have that detailed information available yet. We will try to provide whatever we have.
Thank you, Mr. Fricker. We may not know exactly, but hopefully we can at least pinpoint how much of an investment we're going to make in each ward. Now, with the youth violence piece again, what is the investment in each ward? I know we've identified some organizations, but in each ward, because hopefully what we will be able to do, again, I know each council person was asked to put in some things back when this was first getting started, but somewhere in this process, we'll be able to see what our investment is in each ward, so that within those wards we can create the synergy between the organizations in those wards. But it's going to take resources.
Correct, understood. I mean, I think there's there's certainly a commitment to, to try to distribute these dollars, into the areas of need, in the areas of most need. Certainly we will have, kind of after the dollars have been spent, a very direct accounting of by location. We're even kind of incorporating our GIS technology into, the expenditure locations of these dollars. So, but I would say up front, certainly there's a commitment to disperse these dollars where they're needed the most.
So I'm assuming, Mr. Frick, I'm assuming that, I think what Mr. Neal's saying, wanting to see where the dollars are going, so the onus, that would really be on the contractors, whatever organizations we're dealing with, either for them to, they usually don't think in terms of wards like we do, but for them to at least provide a database so we could map and see, okay, here's where these dollars are going for future projects.
Chair.
Correct. I mean,
Yes.
And we will definitely provide the information we receive. It's just a premature question. We haven't even provided our contracts with even the violence intervention, but that is part of the grant requirements, the back-end reporting. What child received these services? What's their zip code? It's a normal grant reporting process. We're just not to that level yet. So at this point, the contracts haven't been provided. Services are not even in place. Same with housing rehab, but once we get all of that up and running, we can heat map all of that. It's premature at this point to offer any of that because it just hasn't been, the services have not been provided as of yet.
Sure. Thank you. Mr. Fusco.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair? If I may, sir, all due respect, Ms. Williams, not premature in the sense of we know what areas have been identified as hotspots for youth violence. My ward has been identified as one. And I think by allocating some resources that are specifically for an area that we can then know that we're going to work with, maybe some of these are organizations that have been identified already, but if not, organizations that are in that area, the youth programs that are already operating, the block clubs that are already operating, knowing that we have some dollars to work with, that right there would be helpful in creating the coordinated wraparound support that we need in our different wards. So that data is out there. We've, certain wards have already been identified of having higher needs than others when it comes to, the violence aspect, as well as the housing. So I would just love to see when we can lay out this map and see where these dollars are presently targeted to go to make sure that the equitable investment is there by wards.
All right, thank you. Mr. Fusco.
Yes, thank you. Through our presentations from Guidehouse, I believe, we received, and I know maybe on one or two occasions, the map that indicates the hardest hit communities where the majority of the funds are probably going to go. They also, Guidehouse mentioned to us that in some of the areas that's not within that hardest hit, we would have to figure out ways to get it there. But however, that map, which I believe Mr. Neal includes 4 and 3 in parts of 10, but the map, I just ask my colleagues to refer back to that map because that's where the majority of the funds are going to go.
Correct.
That was a presentation that we received.
And there's a lot of language within the ARPA guidelines that try to target those dollars towards qualified census tracts.
Exactly.
And things like that. So
I assume that would be a good, and that might answer some of the question. So at least in this first inning of the whole project. Thank you.
Mr. Malik.
Thank you. Just in similar vein as Mr. Fusco, I guess my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fricker and Ms. Williams, is that take, for example, the gun violence, community violence grants, right? Those are going to specific nonprofits. They're going to provide services, but we don't have any way right now of knowing the residential locations of the recipients of the services, right? We know generally probably where some of those services will be delivered, right? But we can't necessarily know the wards that of the residents who will obtain those services. We do know that these are services that are being provided, in places where they are needed to folks who need them with certain qualifications, which, to Mr. Fricker's point, speaks to the equity consideration, right? The same thing with the housing rehab dollars, to my understanding, right? Housing rehab will be a citywide program, but the qualifications will likely mean that folks will hopefully use it in wards where there is a greater need. Is that correct, Mr. Fricker?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Discipline ourselves to keep on dollar questions here. Obviously, with these ARPA dollars, there's a lot of program questions I think a lot of folks over on this side have. But let me go to Ms. Holland, you did have your hand up, and I see it's down now. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Malik actually addressed most of my question. Thank you for that. I would ask, if possible, I believe Mr. Neal had asked on the previous presentation if we might have a breakout of positions and salaries. I would ask for that same thing for this presentation, if that's possible and available. And I would only add, sort of to tag along to the question that was just asked, that it was also my understanding that there will be an effort made that we not sort of, I guess, become redundant. Take, for example, the youth violence prevention programs. And Mr. Chair, I do understand we're trying to stay focused on numbers here, but that there will be an effort that we not, for example, offer all the programs all on the same day, all at the same place, all at the same time, but that there's going to be some effort to make these open and available. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
okay, thank you. I think, Mr. Fricker, you did say that there is going to be the individual with the salaries will come our way.
Yeah, so, I mean, the document that I had in mind did not have the salaries. It had the positions and a listing of which positions were open and not open.
Okay.
Good. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, very good. Let's see here. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think Mr. Fusco alluded to something that can help answer my question. I understand we do have maps that show, areas that qualify for ARPA dollars, that maybe receive ARPA dollars, just like we have maps that show hot spots for violence in our community. To be more definitive of my question, what I'm asking is we are allocating or budgeting, expensing ARPA dollars now. It would be good to see how those dollars are being expensed and budgeted. If we lay those over that map where we say that these areas qualify and there's a need, or these are hot spots for violence, that those dollars, that we see that those dollars are targeted towards those areas. Because I'm just of the firm belief that somewhere within our budget process, we have to allocate dollars specifically to the wards so that they can be utilized in whatever way they need. I mean, I'll share this. Just coming back from NLC, talking with our colleagues in Youngstown and other cities, just like we did with the COVID dollars, where each ward got $100,000, our colleagues in Youngstown, a city of 60,000 people, 7 councilmen, each councilman got $1 million to work with within their wards, to do housing, youth, whatever their need is. Giving dollars to organizations is one thing, and that's what's happened all the time. What has never happened.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt because we do want to stay on task with numbers, and we do want to stay on task.
That will help us.
We're talking program now, Mr. Neal. So if we, and I know it's tough to do, Mr. Neal. Tough for me. It's tough for everybody. We can just stay on task with the numbers that we have in front of us. It'd just be deeply appreciated. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah. What will help me is having that map to see the overlay to make sure that we're expensing the dollars properly. Thank you, sir.
Understood, yes. Thank you very much. It's a good point, and I'm glad the map was brought up, and we will take a look at that. And Mr. Fricker, do we want to go into planning now, or?
Yeah, so planning, kind of falls under the Department of Integrated Development, but we do have Jason Segedy, our planning director, who can give a few highlights. The other division that's under planning is our AMATS division.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon. I promise I will give you a brief discussion of planning, but I think 99% really was covered in the OID discussion, and Mr. Fricker can correct me if I'm wrong, but because of the way the omnibus is set up, we've got the planning administration broken out, but I oversee both zoning and long-range planning that you already heard about, and then the AMATS division, the Akron Metropolitan Area Transportation Study, which has never been run so well since the previous director left, is under planning as well, and that's an agency that serves Summit and Portage County and a portion of Wayne County for the allocation of federal transportation funds and transportation planning activities. So I think in a nutshell, that's what you didn't hear on the OID part of the presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Look for any questions first from the chambers here on High Street. Looking around, any questions, comments? All right, now let me look at any questions or comments we might have from our online members. Mr. Fricker, they're letting him off easy. You know, I kind of feel the previous departments started. Please let your folks know we appreciate what they do.
Absolutely.
We don't do that enough, and we appreciate a lot of work that takes place that is not real glorious. We do not see a lot, but it's very necessary to the life of our citizens. So thank you very, very much.
Well, that goes both ways.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I think we should move on to our Department of Public Safety. I know that we have Chief Milet is joined via the Zoom call. We have Major Harding and Captain Laughlin here as well. Captain Laughlin now oversees the 911 call center.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Who would like to take lead here?
I'll jump in and take lead. Chief Harding is going to throw me right into the fire on the first one, so take it easy on me. Thank you for allowing us to be here. First thing I want to talk about is...
Excuse me, can I have you pull that microphone just a little bit closer to you so those at home can hear a little clearer? Thanks so much.
First thing I want to say is our communication center. They are the unsung heroes in the safety forces, and I just interviewed this week for some new candidates, and I reiterated to them that they are a part of the safety forces team. None is more important than the other between police, fire, and dispatch. In fact, they are probably more important because they're responsible for getting the information from the caller, properly relayed to the dispatcher and to our team to head out there. So they are definitely the unsung heroes, part of the safety forces. I wanted to convey that also. Some of the 2021 accomplishments. We answered 356,460 calls for service into the center. That's a 2.3% increase over 2020. And of that, 164,456 were 911 calls. So they're taking a lot of calls and doing a lot of work in the center. We are mandated by state to have call answer rates. We were in compliance with that. There's some 911 funding that goes along with that. We were in compliance. We have 90% of them they answered within 10 seconds and 95% within the 20 seconds. So like I said, we were in compliance, always working to improve on that, and it's a report that we keep tabs on daily on that. One thing we also did in 2021, we completed the State of Ohio Public Safety Answering Point Audit. It was accepted with no revisions from them. That was another positive thing in the center. And then we also exceeded the state training requirements for technicians. So we're doing a lot of great work in the center, and I say being new up there, learning a lot, but I'm proud of all the great work that they're doing up there.
I can tell I've been here for a long time when I see you sitting here as a captain and say I knew you'd win. So
yeah, many years ago at the chapel, crossing you across the street. So yeah, we both didn't have as much gray hair at that time either.
Thank you so much. Obviously, what you folks do, it's a lifeline to each and every one of us, knowing we can hit 3 numbers and reach out and get some help there. So
next thing, we're going to keep working in 2022 on our recruiting. The Portage Lakes Career Center wants to start a dispatch training program, so working with them to get that program up and running, because we have, all of our supervisors have a number of years of service and a wealth of knowledge, so we're going to work with them. Our local high schools, which continue to do that because at 18 they may apply, so we're going to keep pushing the limits of the reach to make sure we're able to properly staff the center to be responsive to our community.
Is it the challenge you thought it would be?
Yeah, it's a new challenge. I spent my entire career in patrol, a little bit of time in DB, and it's a new challenge to bring my perspective to another part of the police department and offer some insight there. So it's an exciting new challenge. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you for your service. Thank you very, very much. I want to go in the right order here. I don't know if Chief wants to go next or. Okay. Chief, this is your first time to one of our budget hearings, so welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. We hope to see you at another 9, 10, 11 of these. I don't know how many.
I'm hoping so too. Would you mind if I grab my fiscal manager real quick?
No, that would be fine. Thank you.
I just turned 25 years February, so it's been a quick 25 years for me.
Don't get a lot of chance at 25, do you?
No. It's a weird feeling to be at that point in my career.
All right, Mr. Fusco.
Yeah, quick question in reference to, I believe this is 911, the communications operating, the cost center fund. I see that at 16.
Referring to page 38?
Yes, thank you, page 38. Just curious what that's reflective of.
Okay, so this is actually this is Malcolm Valentine's division, which is actually going to be presented under the Department of Finance. So communications is now part of our IT department. So this relates to the maintenance of the radio system and then the city's fiber infrastructure.
I was wondering because it was like right after the 911, and it was like, wait a minute, what is this? Thank you.
All right, very good. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
And we are having to ask everyone, because of our guests that are online, nice and close to the microphone.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So good afternoon, Chairman Freeman and members of council. My name is Steve Milet, and I am your Chief of Police. Joining me today are Deputy Chief Mike Capers, Deputy Chief Brian Hart, and Captain Augustino Macozy, who will be, there he is, and Captain Dave Laughlin. Before you this afternoon is the Akron Police Department's proposed budget for fiscal year 2022. And before I turn this presentation over to our fiscal manager, Captain Macozy, I would like to say that as we developed our budget for 2022, we took great care to ensure we were being responsible with the community's monies, and that every dollar we spend or we plan on spending in 2022 will be used to accomplish our primary mission, which is to reduce crime, reduce the fear of crime, and enhance the quality of life for everyone who calls Akron home. Some of our goals for this year include focusing our efforts to continually build trust within the community, address the violence that continues to negatively impact Akron, and to continue to recruit, hire, and retain a talented and diverse workforce to assist us as we move the APD into the future. And as I look to the future, I'm excited for what we will accomplish in 2022 and beyond, as we work in partnership with the community, the Akron City team, and the many stakeholder groups that are working so hard to make Akron the safest city in Ohio and in the country. And I believe firmly that by working together, I'm convinced that we can make this happen. So with this, I am going to turn the presentation over to Captain Macozy, who has worked very, very hard to get us to this point where we are ready to answer any questions that you might have. Cap?
Thank you, Chief. Captain?
Good afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and yield to the Communication Center first, because I think that's the first one on your schedule, and then I'll circle back around when it's my turn.
Very good.
I think they already won.
All right, very good then. We work very closly with the Finance Director's Office to put together the budget. As you can tell from the documentation is pretty complex, so I'll allow you to ask your questions first, and we'll work our way through those.
Questions, comments? It's a lot of stuff here. This is another one of those places where I'm tempted to break in to ask you a lot of program questions. We're trying to keep it $2, so I'm looking in the chambers. Any questions as relates to the budget here? And looking on, I see Mr. Malik, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief. Thank you to the majors and the captain. Appreciate the information that you've shared. Particularly appreciate the goals and objectives document. And there's a lot of really helpful information in there. Particularly for my colleagues and for any media would suggest there are a number of instances where we've noted specific actions, commendable actions taken by officers that are definitely worthy of us all taking a look at them. Chief, my first question is about the number of officers. I know that, and the number of total staff. I know that in the budget overview on Monday, we talked about the fact that we're adding 5 police officers and adding a number of civilian staff as well. Can you kind of talk about how you all arrived at that decision with the administration and sort of how it fits into overall staffing levels? I know that staffing has been a significant concern over the last year with regard to COVID, but also just generally with retirements and separation.
So we thank you very much for the question, Councilman. As we look at our staffing into the future, we know we are going to be seeing more and more officers, senior officers and senior civilian staff members retire. They've done their time, they've reached that goal, and they deserve to go out on top and enjoy their retirement. We're looking at those numbers very closely. We also recognize that we're dealing with a different generation of employee right now, and I'm not saying that in a disparaging way, it's just fact. Most employees that are coming into the workforce, I think with all professions, are staying about 5 years and then they're moving on to something else. At least that's what I'm hearing on the national level among police chiefs. And I have witnessed that in other departments that I've served in. And so as we look at that, and then we also look at the dedicated time on reactive calls that our patrol officers specifically are working on during their shifts. We want them to have as much proactive time to engage in all of the tactics of community policing, the community policing philosophy, getting out of their cars, and I'm hearing it throughout the community during ward meetings. We'd like to see more officers on foot. I've heard that in Kenmore, I've heard that in Ward 5, I've heard that in many, many different places. And right now we are primarily call-driven in part because we continue to chase our tail with the vacancies that we have. So my hope in 2022, we're about to launch a major recruitment campaign, and my hope is that we're going to get a lot of interest throughout Akron, the Akron community and beyond, to fill those holes, but also to build towards filling the positions before the vacancy happens, if that makes sense. So we're never in this deficit again. So Councilman, I'm not sure if I answered your question, and Augie can elaborate a little bit more on the math, if that would help.
I think you did answer the question. In fact, you started answering the follow-up because I really appreciate your point about reactive calls versus proactive time, and that's where I was going with it. So would it be possible to have some kind of breakdown of the number of staff sworn in civilian, like per subdivision or per bureau, to get a better sense of that? And then I guess if as we try to move towards a situation where, I guess in my mind, hopefully all patrol officers have some dedicated time that they can spend on proactive responses, what will that mean in terms of staffing? Is that 10 more officers? Is that 20 more officers? Is that 0 more officers, but folks reassigned and priorities reassigned within the department? How do we get there? I know it's a big question, but how do we get there?
That is exactly what we're evaluating right now. We're also looking at implementing a 10-hour shift schedule, which would create more positions on the shifts and give officers a little bit more time to get out of their car, hopefully. But again, we're in the evaluation phase of all this. But there's many things that we can do, working with our union. They have a seat at the table in designing what it's going to look like in the future, because we all have the same goals in mind, and that is to provide the best services to our Akron community.
Thank you, sir. Just one more follow-up. I know in the goals and objectives document you mentioned the importance of having competitive pay and benefits, especially as folks are often going to other departments. I guess, what is your sense of how competitive we are right now, and whether it's obviously we want to make sure that officers are doing a very difficult job. We want to make sure that they are being appropriately compensated for that. Do you think that's something where we need to particularly work on, or what is your sense of that? And Captain McCosey, if you have any opinion on that as well, I would like to hear.
Again, thank you for the question, Councilman. We're in contract negotiations right now. One of the things that we look at is not only the base salary, which is important, but all of the benefits and the total compensation package, to include the cost of living here in Akron as compared to elsewhere in the state or outside of our state. But we are looking and examining the other total compensation packets from our competitors. So to compete, we do compete not only with police departments, but the first time in my career, in the last 5 years, we're competing with the private sector as well, because for many different reasons. And so, Augie, I don't know if you have anything else that you want to say to elaborate on that.
I think you said it well, sir.
It's very important. It is very important. And I know we all want to give our employees, and I know the council feels this way because I've heard it from you. We want to give our employees the best compensation package that Akron can afford. And it's important that, we continue to message that to our employees. And we're doing that through contract negotiations.
Thank you. I really appreciate the answers, and I guess the only comment I would have on top of that is that, at every level, across every department, we can't afford not to invest in our employees. I know you would agree.
It's very important. I agree with you, and they deserve it.
Thank you. Any other budget-related questions from within council? Okay, then we'll go out to online. Ms. Holly.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you for all of the information presented, and thank you, Chief, for being here. And I'm just going to comment that it seems that my colleague, Mr. Malik, always kind of beats me to the punch, and I need to raise my hand faster. But I'm going to follow up on where he was going. I am interested in, as we look forward to recruiting and bringing in additional public safety personnel, this issue of whether we are adequately competitive in what we are anticipating will be offering in terms of pay and benefits. It's the whole package that we must regard, and I kind of want to find a way to tie in another question that was posed, which was about this idea of a culture where we're looking at both proactive and reactive response. And I'm interested in knowing whether you believe that kind of combination recipe, if you will, affects and perhaps drives to some degree the need to be ever more cognizant of competitive relationship to other markets, other departments, and whether you think this proposed budget offers you the breathing room that you need as you go out to recruit candidates for this next class and going forward.
Thank you again for the question, Council Member. This being my first budget process, I'm still absorbing a lot, and I know moving forward that remaining competitive with agencies of a similar size, smaller and larger, is going to be paramount. And I'm not prepared right now to say anything directly on where we stand with our top 10 competitors, but please let me reassure you that that is definitely paramount as we're moving through contract negotiations. I'm not at liberty to get too deep into contract negotiations because we're right in the middle of it, but this is being discussed very carefully and very closely.
I think I can fairly say that, as my colleague mentioned, that the hope here is that we are always attracting and retaining the very best in every department in the city of Akron.
That's where it begins. It begins with who we're hiring. And
absolutely.
Yes,
thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to come to Mr. Neal now. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe Mr. Mobia was before me, sir.
Ms. Mobia.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Chief, thank you for the information. One of the things that I have learned here at the NLC conference, training, and I know that training is probably part of your negotiations, I'm not sure how much, but I know that that's critically important. But one of the trainings that they have emphasized a lot, and I don't know if you've heard about it, maybe you have, is mindfulness, and how that particular training incorporates so much that police officers and other safety forces are benefiting from. And you can certainly contact NLC to get more information. They had some wonderful trainers here who talked a lot about that. So I know that's critically important to the department.
It is so vitally important, the level of training that we are providing our employees. And I think our training here in Akron is very good. It could always get better, so I'll reach out to you, ma'am, for the contact information, and we will make contact and see if there's things that we can bring here to Akron to make us better and to continue on our journey forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll come to you, Mr. Neal, and then after that, Mr. Fusco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation, Chief. I have a couple questions. One, in the salary and wages, is there already, how much of that is budgeted for overtime? And if this may be on another document, but if we could take a look at Mr. Fricker, what was the amount of overtime for 2021, projected for 2022, and if I heard the Chief correctly, if we have a civilian force that's going to be part of community engagement, how much potentially will that workforce reduce overtime, thus increasing the amount of service that we could give, but also saving the city money?
So thank you for the question. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, sir. No, go ahead, sir. I'll ask my second question after you answer that one. Thank you, sir.
I'm going to look to Captain McCosey and Mr. Fricker to respond.
So in 2021, our overtime budget was about $2.7 million. For 2022, we budgeted in about $3 million again for this year. We don't anticipate that to be terribly different going into the following years. So. Now, as far as the civilian portion of it, I can't comment on that part.
Okay.
Councilman Neal, I think as we move forward, we're looking at building our civilian staff dramatically. And I am evaluating where our officers are and what functions they're performing. These are issues that I do need to work closely together with the union on. But I do think that the future of this police department incorporates both adding more sworn staff, but adding more civilian staff, primarily civilian staff.
And Chief, you may have said this at one of the community meetings you were at. When I look at a holistic approach, I know that, under Park and Rec, they have park ambassadors. We've talked about within the Neighborhood Assistance Department and the housing, how they're short-staffed. If we had the police department with the Park and Rec and Neighborhood Assistance having, I'm just going to use the term community ambassadors, that did the low-end service calls for police. That I'm trying to get an understanding if there's some communication between our departments to look at how we can maximize our service outreach and reduce the overall cost, reduce that service call from a high-end service call to a lower-end service call. And Chief, I think it was in a meeting that you had when you talked about having some type of junior police force, correct me if I'm wrong, or where they would do some type of community service working for the city that would be an on-ramp into becoming a police officer, because they would be handling those kind of community engagement calls.
Yes, sir. And yes, in a nutshell, yes, that is an idea that we're exploring. It's our responsibility to look at the types of calls that we're responding to and question ourselves, does this require police presence? Does this require a badge and a gun showing up at this call? And if it doesn't, is there another system that we can produce to provide the same level of service to the community member without the presence of law enforcement there to free us up to handle only those things that law enforcement can handle? That, and then looking at different internship programs, looking at somebody who's 19 years of age that wants to join the police department. They have the character, they have all the traits that we're looking for. Is there something we can give them here as employment to get them into the Akron family early, start instilling our city values into them, so by the time that they are eligible to become a police officer, they've already traveled the distance that it takes new employees to travel a year or two in terms of our values and such as Akron.
Okay, well thank you. So that's the basis of my question. I'm hoping that the police department, the service department, and others are looking at how wherever there's overtime in all those areas or a need, we can create this synergy so that we can create this on-ramp position and maximize service and save dollars. Because if of that $2 million we can cut that in half, now we're budgeting $3 million, by having these folks address some of these needs, as well as maximizing the use of our reserve officers, I think we'll, again, maximize service, save costs, and create a talent pool that they could go into the police department or some other area within the service. So thank you for answering my question, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm going to come over to Mr. Fusco.
Yeah, just real quick, where within this, APD has been a front runner whenever it comes to body-worn cameras. Where within this budget, though, where I see those numbers in terms of our expense on the body-worn camera piece? It's a great program, vital and important. I'm just curious what the cost is.
So typically those numbers are contained within the issue 4 portion of the police budget. So there's kind of an ongoing expense
that we cover every year.
And you could get back, if you can get back to all of council, if you can break that out, that'd be great.
Yes, as far as just the body-worn camera, just that, it's in the neighborhood of $240,000 a year. We do have a contract with them, several contracts. Some of those are coming up due, and so we're going to be renegotiating those contracts. I can tell you that the appearance at this point is that as those contracts lapse, the cost is going to approximately double from where it's at now. So while we're total for body-worn camera and taser and everything Axon, all the evidence.com and all those different components, it's about $320,000 a year.
Okay.
We expect that that's going to go to about $635,000 to $640,000 per year within the next couple of years. So there's going to be a pretty good jump. The biggest of the contracts comes up due at the end of 23. So that's where we're going to start to feel the pinch on those. We're starting to look at taser now, which is going to lapse at the end of this year. So some of these things are going to come up due. It's going to hurt. It's something that we're going to have to look forward at, how we're going to fund those things, whether we still want to fund those things and at what level. So we're looking at those things now, but that's where we're at.
Yeah,
we're looking at
the
that
body-worn
doubling
camera piece for sure
Yes.
is something that we want to continue. But I appreciate the cost is going to escalate as time goes on. But thank you for that information. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Fricker, did I see you over there sharpening your pencil? You said those costs are going to double. So I think I don't want to speak for all of council, but I think we see that those body cameras are worth their weight. So
it's as important as any other tool, and more important than some of the tools that the officers carry, because it tells the story.
Yep. All right, let me see, looking here, Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that one of the recommendations from the Racial Equity and Social Justice Task Force was that all officers, particularly in SWAT and engaged in secondary employment, wear body cameras. I guess my question is for Captain McCosey, and the recommendation was that this be implemented in 2022, and I certainly concur with it. Captain McCosey, is this something that could occur within what's currently budgeted for body cameras?
To add those cameras will cost more. While we have a few spares, we have some spares that we could develop that. We don't have enough spares for all of that. So we are working on that. There is the availability of the cameras for our officers at times for their extra jobs. And we are working on and have been reviewing and evaluating whether we're going to put cameras on our officers on SWAT. There's a lot of considerations there that go way beyond cost. So those are things that we need to consider, but a lot of those things are policy decisions that we're still working through.
Thank you, Captain. One other follow-up from something that you said, Chief Milet. You talked about the importance of determining whether there needs to be an armed or uniformed response to particular calls, and I know we've discussed this, certainly this council has discussed this, the community has discussed this. I know that one of the things that being explored was I believe a co-responder pilot program. There have been discussions about alternative responder programs. Is there funding in this budget for a co-responder pilot program?
I don't believe so. Augie, is there? For a co-responder program to partner officers with mental health professionals?
Not at this time.
I don't think we got to the point, Councilman, where we settled on a model and costed it out and try to figure out how this would be implemented and, you know, the costs associated with it. We're still in the evaluation, and I hate to keep on using that term, but we're evaluating the different programs from across the country and trying to figure out which one best fits the needs of Akron. Because what works in one community may not work here, and we need to be very responsible when we're making that decision. And I know the Director of Public Safety has been overseeing that, that evaluation.
Thank you, sir. And I definitely understand that there are just an incredible amount of challenges, day-to-day challenges that are being dealt with. And there are lots of, like you said, there's a lot that's going on with contract negotiations. But I know that this particular thing is something we've discussed for more than a year now, since the summer of 2020. So I know that predates you as well. But, you know, I hope that it's something where we can at least get a pilot program started sooner rather than later. And if there's any way that, you know, we as council can assist or other things, I think it's, you know, I think it's very important. But I know there's been lots of hundreds of hours of work put into it by everyone assembled there in council chambers. So I do appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Holland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm now wanting to address a really riveting topic that is near and dear to everyone's heart, and that is public records. And I understand that there's some deep concern about capacity to handle what is a tedious but really crucial task. And I see that there has been some shifting of responsibility for this. Does this budget reflect some increased coverage or the potential for greater capacity for you folks to cover that additional duty? Can you respond to that for me, please?
Well, yeah, I'll defer to you on it.
Yes, this budget does include additional personnel to work in our record room, where most of those record requests are going to be processed. It does not equal the total number of employees that were doing it in the past, but we're moving into this incrementally to make sure that we're doing the best with the resources that we have.
So it is my understanding that there was a shift in how things were done, and that routine and pedestrian, pun intended, requests for records of, say, accident reports had been done one way, and that system changed roughly middle of last year and are a little more automated. Am I getting that right?
Yes, that's correct. In some cases, we have the ability to pull records. Anyone can pull records online. We got back to that capability where we can pull an incident report or a crash report from online resources, and that doesn't require an individual person to pull that record, make a copy, and provide it.
Is there potential perhaps to automate some more of the satisfaction of record requests, or not so much?
I'm going to pass that one to Deputy Chief Harding because he worked closely on that program.
Yeah, so we've put quite a few records online. Some of them require individual redaction, more thorough reports would be read. But with the Tyler product, we were, initially when we went live, those were not online. But now citizens can get community crime map information online. They can get the bulk of our reports online, as well as our accident reports online. So that has made a big difference there. So I think at this point, we've pretty much reached our point of what we can put online through the use of Tyler at this point.
So, Deputy Chief, would you say then that that greater ease that's provided by some digital automation has just kind of kept you at maybe a break-even point, but that the demand continues to rise?
Yeah, I think it made a big impact. When we first went live and lost some of that functionality, it really put us behind, but we were able to finally catch up to that point. But as we mentioned earlier, public records are still an issue that can take a lot of additional personnel, and keeping and retaining staff there has been a challenge and something we're still working through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, and I don't know if this is, it has to be possible. How could you, I don't know how many roll calls it would take for each one of those to cover all of your men and women that are on the street, that in the roll call there could be just one little blip of, you know, we sat with City Council and they wanted to let you know that they deeply appreciate what each and every one of you do. Is that, I mean, I know there's a cycle of how folks work. Could that be done?
Bank on it. I promise you I will. They need to hear it, and they appreciate it when they do hear it.
Right. And then, obviously, then there's the administrative folks, however that information is disseminated to them. You know, my mind always goes to patrol, because those are the folks we see all the time, but if you could, just as a personal favor to us, if you could do that, I think that would mean an awful lot to each and every one of us. So,
I will deliver that message in person.
Okay. We don't say it enough, and the more and more we can say it, I think the better. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks to each and every one of you. Thank you for everything you do. We're going to fire next.
We are, last but not least.
Last but not least, Chief Tucker, come on down. Thank you again, gentlemen. We will give you the opportunity to introduce yourselves. We know who you are, but we'll allow you to introduce yourselves. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I am Fire Chief Clarence Tucker.
One thing, you may not have been in the room, because of our folks that are online, we have to be nice and close with the microphone.
Yes, understood. Good afternoon. I am Fire Chief Clarence Tucker. And it is my pleasure to present to you the 2022 operational budget for the Akron Fire Department. With me, I have District Chief. Button?
All right, is that better? Oh, that is so much better. Thank you.
There we go. I'll start again. I'm Fire Chief Clarence Tucker, and it is my pleasure to present to you the 2022 operational budget for the Akron Fire Department. I have with me District Chief Steve Count, who's in charge of our finances.
All right. Just kind of throw it out to you right now, and we'll come up with some. We're trying to stick to budget questions. You won't hear a lot of operational questions today.
Okay.
As far as, why are you doing this? Have you thought about that? We'll be sticking to the numbers, but we'd like to hear from you, and then we can put some of our thoughts together as we're listening. Thank you.
All right, well, some of the accomplishments from 2021 include the fact that we responded to over 50,000 calls for service. Of those, more than 11,000 were calls for actual fires. Actually more than 44,000 of those calls were for EMS services. And we had regrettably 41 civilian-related injuries and 16 fire-related civilian fatalities in 2021. And with that, some of our goals are to continue to provide the effective fire and EMS services to the citizens of Akron, and do that in a very safe and physically responsible way. And we want to do that with continuing some of the services that we have and aggressively going after grants, both federal, state, and local, that we can acquire to help us with our financial needs. With that, I'd like to turn it over to District Chief Count.
Chief?
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, Council. First, I'd like to thank the council members. We come in front of you quite a bit by Zoom last couple of years, but it's good to be back in front of you again. And just express our appreciation for your support. It's always felt. We feel that you guys are on our side. We come to you with a lot of equipment needs, manpower needs, staffing needs, I should say, and you're always there to support us. So I'd like to first start off and say thank you so much for that. And also I'd like to thank, while I'm here, the Finance Department, Steve Fricker, Cindy Donnell, Mike Wheeler. Day to day, when I have questions, when we have needs, they're always there for us, work with us hand in hand, so it is much appreciated to have them on our side also. So I'll just mention a couple highlights, if you will, from the budget. So 2021 was kind of a tough year as we were all coming out of the pandemic, moving through the pandemic. We've lost a lot of members also, like the police department are losing. We have a lot of members that are reaching their retirement age, And then they hit it on the head that we are seeing also with our younger members a 5 to 7 year move on to something else, and it's becoming tough for us to compete with other smaller departments also. So we had 26 members in 2021 leave us. We're only able to hire 19. We were already behind the 8 ball at that time. Unfortunately, through 2020, we weren't able to hire. We were scheduled to have a class, but that combination of not having a class in 2020 and then losing so many in 2020 and 2021 still put us behind. We're catching up though. Chief Tucker's doing a great job working with our recruiting team. We have an active list. We hired 19 in September that are out on the streets now. We currently have 20 in our training academy, and I know they're working hard. I'm probably going to be doing some interviews here to try to get as many members into another class sometime this summer or fall. So we're catching up. We're doing everything we can. I'll just throw one more thing out. We were fortunate last year to receive funding through FEMA, a SAFER grant, the Staffing for Adequate Emergency Response, and $7.5 million. It'll be over 3 years. That'll be funding for wages and benefits of 25 new hires. So we're looking forward to that. Looking forward to Station 12 coming to fruition. So a lot of good things coming up this year.
Absolutely, yeah. Issue 4 made a difference for all of us, didn't it? And I don't know where to find this in here, Mr. Fricker. When we go into a recruiting campaign, where would those costs be in the budget here? When they're,
So those costs are included in the actual operating budget of the fire department. Sometimes, and I don't know that we've done it so much in fire, we'll have some of that in the issue 4 budget, but I know that we included, within this budget, some of the costs for bringing a class on, such as like the new uniforms, and typically you have things like background checks and all of that. There's a lot that goes into hiring a firefighter or a police officer, and all those costs are included, in the operating budgets each year when we go through that hiring process.
And I should know, a recruiting campaign, what's the general cost, right off the top of your head?
I'll refer to Chief Cowd on that.
I think the figure was set around $20,000 for the last round.
Oh.
Yeah. I will point out one other thing that we've done along the recruiting lines, and we'll get to this when we get to the human resources budget, is we just recently hired a recruiter in HR, and we're going to hire a second one, and it's reflected in both the police and fire budgets that will be split evenly between police and fire to help with recruiting. So we're going to have a dedicated recruiter just for police and fire.
Excellent. We had that before?
We have not.
Okay, that's great. Fantastic. Did you say 2 classes are coming up?
We currently have a class of 20 cadets in our fire training academy, and we are looking forward to hiring another class toward the fall.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right. Questions, comments from members in the chambers? And looking here online. I will say, I know my experiences. You talk about the equipment we're able to buy. I don't know how many years ago it was, and you'll know the technical name for it. It was a device where they could put on, could go into a smoke-filled room, and could see somebody 30 feet across the room. What's that called?
Thermal imagers.
I remember when we approved that, and it seemed like it was months later, somebody's life was saved because of that. And I know for council, those are the kind of things where, you kind of swell up with pride. Oh, we had a part in that, but I don't think there's been many unreasonable requests that have come, and we're really, really grateful, the citizens of Akron for making those monies available. Don't have to look too far to see a lot of new firehouses. That's fantastic. Mr. Fusco, did you have a comment? I thought I saw something from you there.
Yes and no. I noticed here on page 43, I believe there's budget employees and then as the 21 budgeted and 22 budgeted. However, though, conversely, though, there is an increase. So in terms of the labor accounts.
So that is reflective of the fact that we have the FEMA grant.
Okay.
So that number declines here, but because we now have 25 firefighters that are on that FEMA grant, that's the reason for that decline in the general fund.
Very good.
Okay, I apologize to our folks online. I didn't see what order your hands came up in, so I will start with, I'll start with Ms. Holland. I started to make a crack. I'm going to start with, age or beauty or something, and I thought that'll only get me in trouble. So, Ms. Holland, if you could, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief, and thank you for all that you do. It's a great honor, by the way, to be in this meeting today and to have a chance to hear from our public safety leaders. I guess I'm going to pose a similar question to the one that I offered to Chief Milet earlier. Given the proposed budget for fire, I guess I'm interested in knowing whether you feel that the budget proposed represents something that gives you adequate bandwidth, adequate breathing room to meet the recruiting goals that you have, whether you feel that it represents something that allows us to be competitive.
Thank you for that question. What I can tell you is the budget that we had for our last round of firefighters, the ones that are currently in class, and also the ones that we were able to hire and put on the line back in December. We were able to put together a team of 7 or 8 firefighters and a recruitment team that went to many, many different areas around Northeast Ohio to recruit new firefighters, and it was a very diverse group. And I was very proud of the efforts that group put forth. Many of the events that they wanted to go to, that they had scheduled, were very successful. And then when things popped up last minute, they volunteered to go and actually do some additional recruitment. So I was very pleased with the effort that they put forth, and they put in many, many hours in trying to get us with the best possible candidates for the city of Akron. So in that particular case, I do believe that we had enough adequate budget to go out and recruit. I think as this current list that we have now expires later this fall, we will need to be more diligent and be prepared to do it again. This list that we currently have, like I said, expires. And so for next year, between now and next year, we anticipate quite a few more retirements, and we have to be proactive and prepare by asking for another test and preparing to hire more firefighters. So we're about to turn around and do the exact same process again and look for ways that we can improve upon it.
And I would imagine that you follow what many of us follow, which are the interesting statistics about the changing face of the labor market and the likely need to perhaps come at this process a little differently. Is that the case?
That is true. That is true. Again, one of the things that we look at is, what do we want the fire department to look like next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And what we want the fire department to look like is what our community looks like. So we want the fire department to reflect our community, so that's where we're aiming the majority of our focus is to try to make it a diverse group of new recruits that we can bring to the city of Akron.
Glad to hear it, Chief, and thanks for all you do and for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mobian, please.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. I was having a hard time unmuting. Hello, Mr. Tucker and the staff. The question I have has to do with EMTs. I looked at the budget, which you have 157, 158 budgeted in 2021, but you only are budgeting 154 in 2022. Are you having some retirements, or what accounts for that?
Well, I'll defer that question to Chief Count.
I can get that. So it's really, there's a distribution of the firefighters, and now it's really across 3 different funds. So they hit both the general fund, the EMS fund, and now the SAFER grant that we have. So you really have to look at the 3 in total. Our total number of firefighters budgeted this year is 371, which is up from 363 last year. So it's just where they're charged. Yeah.
So how many EMS are we're only budgeting 154, or we have more than that on staff?
So, thank you for that question. If I could try to shed some light on that, like Mr. Fricker said, our general fund, if you look at page 43 for 2022, we have budgeted 217 and a half.
Right.
The EMS on the next page, 44, 154, and then you'll find the other 25 on our SAFER, which is on page 49. So Mr. Fricker's spreading out our wages amongst those 3 funds, but they basically add up. They do add up to our 371 that we're budgeted for this year. It's a little bit more than that because we've got some non-uniformed budgeted in there also, right. But it's 371 uniformed members that we're budgeted for.
And what I can tell you is that we are not looking to decrease the number of EMTs or paramedics that we have on the street. We're looking to maintain enough members to not only meet the needs that we have for the community, but also to be able to rotate the paramedics around a little bit.
Okay. So, do you generally have about half of your force certified EMTs, or is it what's the percentage normally?
Well, actually, all of our firefighter medics are EMTs. We have approximately 170 of those firefighters that are currently paramedics. And that number fluctuates a little bit depending on, retirements and when firefighters can actually get through paramedic school, and that takes about a year. So we typically try to keep somewhere between 155 and about 170 paramedics at all times.
Okay. So I see what you're saying. Thank you very much, and thank you for what you do, Chief and your staff. I know you're getting, Station 12 built. Is there another one being built this year?
There is not, actually, and it's kind of exciting. If you drive by the property where 12 is going to be built, you can see that there are crews out there now clearing the trees away and starting to prepare the ground for us to begin construction of Station 12. And so they just really started here in the last week. And I think it's very exciting. And once again, I appreciate the support of council as well as the support of our citizens with issue 4 in that endeavor. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Come to Mr. Neal and then to Mr. Malik. Mr. Neal?
Oh, thank you, sir. Mr. Malik was before me, sir.
Okay, that's all right. Go ahead, Mr. Neal, and then I'll come to Mr. Malik.
Okay. My question is this, and it may be here, but it's the same one I asked Chief Milet, and thanks Chief Tucker and others who presented. What amount of salary and wages is budgeted for overtime? What was overtime in 2021? What's projected overtime for 2022?
We'll provide the overtime numbers for both police and fire. We'll do that in the document.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fricker. I'm having problems. I'm using two different devices.
I just said we will provide the overtime numbers for police and fire in a document.
Okay. As well as if Mr. Tucker, Chief Tucker, could give us an idea of the percentage of service calls that could be handled by a civilian type support system, because I was just running some numbers on just the $1 million that is budgeted for the increase on police. We could create 25 jobs at $40,000 apiece. If we look at the overtime in the service department, the overtime in the fire department, overtime in police, I believe we could create the support that would ease the burden of those low-end service calls on them, save the city money, and enhance our services. I would like for us to be able to do that with this budget, have a plan to make sure that we can make that happen. Like I said, just with the police department's increase, not even trying to reduce their overtime, that's 25 jobs at $40,000 apiece. I'm sure if we add the fire and the service that we can save the city money and enhance our services. So that information would be helpful. Thank you.
What I can tell you is the way that the fire department operates, we evaluate the manpower that we have for that day, for any particular shift, and we look to see what we need to do to have people in those seats that we can operate and be able to serve the citizens all around Akron. We have 13 fire stations around the city of Akron, and we make sure that we have enough personnel to properly staff those stations every day. And if we don't, then we call in overtime. So, the problem with what you're recommending, and I think it would be a great idea to be able to support those additional jobs you're referring to, is when people call 911, they want service now. They don't want service next week or 3 hours from now. They want service now. So we have to have all of those stations fully staffed to the best of our ability so they can go out to those emergencies. Because again, when you're having, a heart attack, shortness of breath, whatever your issue is, you need people to get there as soon as possible to give you the best possible chance of survival. So it makes it difficult to say, let's cut out 10% of your overtime budget. So where are we going to cut it? Are we not going to staff the west side? Are we not going to staff North Hill? We have to staff all of those stations because we don't know where the next emergency is going to come from. And it could be a small emergency, or it could be, a large, emergency or a fire where we need to put a lot of resources at it, and we don't have prior knowledge of what's coming. We have to be prepared for whatever comes.
I appreciate that, Chief Tucker. You guys may be a little bit different, but I'm sure you have some idea of those service calls that could be handled by others. So it may not save on overtime, but it may save the city on what we call a high-end service call.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief Tucker and District Chief Kaut. Always appreciate the information that you provide and all of the service of all of the members of the Akron Fire Department. My only question is, definitely understand the importance of maintaining the current service levels and the current staffing levels. As I look at the staffing, though, it seems like we do have a net increase in staffing of 8 over 2021. So I guess my question is, are we trying to expand staffing, or are we trying to maintain the current level?
Thank you for that question. And actually, we are trying to expand our services a little bit. The way the city of Akron operates right now, is at each firehouse that we have, and again, we have 13 fire stations, we have some where the paramedics, you have 2 paramedics on the paramedic unit, and you'll have 3 or 4 people on the other fire truck that's there in that station. But some of our stations are what we call comboed. And a comboed station, you may have 4 firefighters at that station that if a fire call comes in, they jump on the fire truck. If an EMS call comes, they jump on that EMS unit. Now, when that EMS unit goes out, and they go out a lot, they go out on a lot of calls. Again, it was over 44,000 calls for service last year. Then that fire truck sits idle. So the more of those units we can decombo to where you have both the fire truck and the paramedic unit staffed, the better. And so we're trying to decombo as many of those units as we can to provide better service to our citizens. Because no one really wants to hear the excuse of, I'm sorry for, the fact that the firefighters were out on an EMS call when my house was on fire 2 doors down. They don't want to hear that excuse. But sometimes that's the reality.
Thank you, Chief. I agree that residents don't want to hear excuses, and that response is very helpful. How many of the stations have combo units versus the other staffing pattern?
From day to day, it differs. So on a day when we don't have too many people call off sick or we don't have too many people hurt, there are a lot of reasons that we might have firefighters that aren't actually at work, from between FMLA, people that are injured, people that are sick. COVID has hit us hard, sometimes much harder than in certain months than others. And during those times, we've done what we can to maintain those units with as many people as possible. Now with that, that's where overtime has come in. It's required us to hire overtime. And again, when we were not able to hire a class in 2020, it put us behind the 8 ball a little bit. So we're now trying to play catch up and get back to full staffing. We haven't been at full staffing in quite some time now, and we're trying to get there while fighting the fact that many of our senior firefighters are choosing to retire.
Just a final follow-up, sir. Is there a specific number that would reflect full staffing in your opinion?
I'm sorry, I was unable to hear that question. Can you repeat, please?
Sure. Is there a particular number, in your opinion, that would reflect full staffing? There really isn't.
What we've tried to do is put as many units on the street as possible and keep them there, and then have some of the new units like our AV1 unit, which does go to our low acuity calls, and keep that staffed as well. We've recently started looking at staffing that one full-time with overtime so that it doesn't affect the number of fire trucks around the city, but it would still provide some relief when it comes to just the sheer number of calls that our firefighters are going on each day. There's been times here in the last year where we've had 190 or 200 calls in one 24-hour period, which is overwhelming. And so we've tried to maintain as many units online as possible.
Thank you, sir, and thank you again for all the work done by the Akron Fire Department.
Thank you.
Chief, I think you were in the chambers when I asked Chief Marlette. I don't know how you would do it with the fire department, but how could you somehow get the information out to everyone at AFD that you met with us, and we wanted to say, as an elected body, thank you. If there's a way that you can do that through a memo or through a meeting or through, I'm not sure, how your operation works. Could that be possibly done?
Oh, absolutely. I can send out a memo or an email to the entire department and let them know that, you're giving us your support. And honestly, I've been here for 33 years now. I've always felt your support. You could always tell. So I've had nothing but full cooperation and support from everybody here at council, and we really appreciate it. It's the kind of thing where if you go to other cities or you see other places, they may not get that support, and frequently they don't, to where, you don't always appreciate what you have here at home. Well, I can tell you, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you for those kind words. Tomorrow evening, we're going to adjourn now. Tomorrow evening, we'll be hearing from City Council, we'll be hearing from Municipal Court, Human Resources, Neighborhood Services, and Public Service. Is that correct, Mr.
That is
Fricker?
correct, yes.
All right. So it is now 5:16. We will adjourn. Thanks to each and every one that was in attendance, and we will see you tomorrow evening at 3 o'clock. Thank you.